Hi everyone, welcome to lab number 1, installing WebLogic. In this lab, you're going to learn how to install WebLogic using the two methods that we went over in the lecture. One is using Oracle Universal Installer to install WebLogic graphically, and the other method is to do a silent install or an unintended install. And you will also uninstall WebLogic as well using the same method. So I'm going to walk through this lab with you right now. I am not going to cover the installation of Java. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to perform. There are links in the lab guide to the install procedures for installing Java. So it is assumed that JDK is already installed. I'm also assuming that you've gone ahead and downloaded the WebLogic 12.1.3 generic installer as described in the lab guide. So what I've done for this course, and you're going to see this throughout the rest of the lab exercises, is that I've created a directory structure for all these labs. So in my environment, and I referenced this in the lab guide, I have this root directory that I'm calling lab home. It's u01/udemy. And if you look in the lab guide, you will see that there is a directory references table. The directory reference table lists several different directories that we will refer to throughout the course of all these labs. So rather than me saying go to c:/udemy or going to ua1/udemy, I'll just say go to lab home. So start off by creating the directory structure as outlined in the lab exercise. You can see in here that I have nothing except for the Oracle Fusion Middleware generic installer. So go ahead and copy that file into this directory from where you downloaded it from. Let's go ahead and make the other directories that are required for this lab exercise. Make a domains directory for holding our domains, and we'll make an applications directory for holding our applications. It's very simple. Okay, now that we've done that, we're ready to fire up the generic installer for WebLogic. So go ahead and execute the generic installer by issuing the following Java command. So just make sure Java is in your path so that when you type Java, something actually happens. So to run the generic installer, we're going to type java-jar and then the name of the generic installer and hit enter. It will take time for Java to extract all the necessary install files and launch the installation wizard. Okay, let me get this window out of the way. So the first window that pops up is the Oracle Inventory Setup window. The Oracle Inventory is used to maintain an inventory of all the Oracle products that you have installed on your system. There are two types of inventory. There's central inventory and there's local inventory. Central inventory is used to maintain inventory on an entire host or server. And that typically requires root permissions to set up, and there's some post-installation steps that you have to do, as you can see in the window down below, where you've got to generate or run the create central inventory shell script. It's not complicated, but for the purposes of this lab and for simplicity's sake, we're going to just use local inventory. So this defaults to the home directory on my computer. I'm going to change this just so that it points to the lab home that we're working with in this course. And then you can leave the operating system group as the default value. So my default OS group is staff. It's going to be different for you most likely. So just leave it as the default and hit OK. So once the inventory is actually created, the Oracle Universal Installer launches. So on the welcome screen, just go ahead and click Next. And then for Oracle Home represents the home directory for WebLogic, where the product is actually installed. So according to the lab guide, we have this pointed to lab home. So I'm going to replace my home directory, which is the default, to u01/udemy. On your system, this can be something else. So once you've specified Oracle Home, go ahead and click Next. And then check the radio button for complete with examples. What this is going to do, and you can see here, is that it's going to install all these software components with all the example code. We're going to leverage all the examples that WebLogic comes with throughout the rest of these lab exercises. Go ahead and click Next. So the installation summary screen is simply just that. It summarizes all the software that's going to be installed, where it's going to be installed, how much disk space is required. And you'll notice down here there's a button called Save Response File. The response file is used to perform silent installs in the future. So let's go ahead and save the response file. I'm going to place this in my U01 Udemy directory or lab home for future reference. And let's call it WebLogic install RSP for response and hit save. Once you've done that, go ahead and click install, and OUI is going to install WebLogic. So once the installation is complete, go ahead and click next. And then on the installation complete page, notice down here for next steps, it says automatically launch the Quick Start configuration wizard. Make sure that box is checked and click finish. The Quick Start wizard is another installation program that will allow us to install and configure the sample domains that come with WebLogic. This is a really convenient utility, so you don't have to do this by hand after the install. The administrative account for all the sample domains is essentially the domain admin user. So specify WebLogic as the username, and the password, the default password that I'm using for every account throughout all the lab exercises is WebLogic123, and that is in the lab guide. Recall that we created a domains directory under lab home. So go ahead and change the default location is this user project subdirectory under Oracle Home. Let's get rid of that. What we want for the domain parent location is u01/udemy or labhome/domains. And do the same for the application parent location as well. So the domain parent location is going to contain all of our domains that we're going to be working with, and the application parent location is going to contain all the applications that we're going to deploy. So keep the defaults for the server listen port and the SSL listen port, 7001, 7002, and go ahead and click Create. This part will definitely take some time depending on your system. Once the 3 domains are created, go ahead and click Next. And then on this configuration details page, you'll see details about each domain that was created. We have 3 domains, WL_server, medrec, and medrec spring. So the WL server domain contains several different types of example applications. They're intended to help developers understand how to design, develop, and deploy applications for WebLogic. The medrec application is an example of a fully baked Java EE application. And medrec Spring is the Spring version of that application. Also notice the URLs. These are the URLs that you're going to use or can use to access the admin server console for each of those domains. Go ahead and click Finish. And that's it, you're done. You just installed WebLogic using OUI. Now let's move on to installing WebLogic silently using the response file. All right, so let's begin with the silent install for WebLogic. In the previous SitLab section, we created a response file when we ran through OUI the first time. So what I want to do is I want to edit the response file that we created. So in my lab home, I should have my WebLogic install.rsp file. Let's go ahead and open that up in a text editor. All right, so as you can see, there are only a couple parameters in here that are of note. Oracle Home, which defines where WebLogic is actually installed, and the install type. Now, if you remember when we ran through the installation wizard the first time, we specified Oracle Home and we specified the installation type as complete with examples. So we want to do the silent install, but I don't want to overwrite what we've previously done. So for just the lab's sake, let's go ahead and modify Oracle Home and put it someplace else. What I want to do, so all I'm going to do is add in a directory to install WebLogic somewhere else. So I've changed the home directory. And then under install type, I don't want to install the example code again. I already have the examples and I've already got the example domains. So let's get rid of this and add in WebLogic server. As you can see, the installation types are listed here. You can install WebLogic server, coherence, or complete with examples. So once you've made the change, go ahead and save the file and exit the editor. Now let's run the silent installer for WebLogic. And in order to do that, we have to pass in some special parameters. So the syntax is similar to what we did earlier, launching OUI. We need java-jar, the name of the generic installer, and then we've got to pass in -silent for silent install, and then specify the fully qualified path for the response file. And then hit enter. So notice that the installer failed. We passed all the operating system checks. However, the silent installer is complaining about the Oracle inventory. When you run the silent installer, it is specifically looking for either a private or global Oracle inventory. Now, when we ran the GUI version of OUI earlier, we had that pop-up where we specified Aura inventory in our home directory. So the purposes of this lab exercise, we're going to create a private directory and then tell the silent installer to use that private directory. So we first have to create a pointer file. The pointer file tells OUI where to find the Oracle inventory. So go ahead and create that silent directory under lab home. And in the silent directory, let's create our inventory pointer file, which I'm going to simply call create private inventory.txt. And in here, we need to add 2 lines. One specifying the location of the inventory, the name of this file and its location can be anything that you want, but I'm trying to follow the lab guide as I've written it. And then the group that should own the Oracle inventory. And in this case, that will be my default operating system group, which is staff. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save this file. If you don't know what group to specify, back at the terminal window, type in groups and use the first group that is returned. So groups will return a list of all the groups in Linux or Mac OS that you're a member of. And you can use any one of these groups essentially, but use the first one. So once you've created the pointer file for the Oracle inventory, let's run the silent installer again, but this time add in another parameter for specifying the location to the pointer file. And make sure to use fully qualified paths. So that will take some time to install, and the silent installer is complete. Let's go ahead and switch directories to that silent directory and take a look at what's in here. You'll see that we have the local private Oracle inventory. So we can take a look at that. They're the log files from the installer. And then there's also another Oracle home that was created under here. So the silent installer is great for automating installations of WebLogic. You really only need three things. You need the generic installer, you need the response file defining where Oracle Home is located and the type of install. And thirdly, you need the Oracle inventory pointer file, which tells the silent installer where to create the Aura inventory. So now that we've installed it silently, we can also uninstall it silently. To do that, let's switch back to Lab Home. So WebLogic comes with a deinstall script that you can run silently to uninstall WebLogic. And that script is located under Oracle Home. Let's go ahead and run that script now to remove the WebLogic that we just installed. So that's going to be under Lab Home. Make sure we reference the silently installed version of WebLogic. So silent/Oracle, Oracle Home, middleware, OUI, bin, and then the deinstall script. So the deinstall script takes a couple parameters, -silent, -response file, and then specify the fully qualified path for the response file. And this script will remove WebLogic silently. Okay, so once WebLogic's uninstalled, go ahead and verify that it actually is uninstalled. So take a look inside the silent directory, and you'll see that there's an Oracle directory. So let's go in there and take a peek. There's nothing under Oracle middleware. So you can actually go ahead and just remove the silent directory altogether. Now, if you had other Oracle products installed, you'd probably want to keep the Oracle inventory around. But if you had WebLogic, only WebLogic installed, you can remove everything. And that's it. So in this lab, we've covered installing WebLogic using Oracle Universal Installer, and we've performed a silent install using the response file.